The old parade route was being painted again. Officer Jared Bennett stood at the corner of Sycamore and Main, watching volunteers in white t-shirts and cut-off jeans lay down fresh red lines on the pavement. The 4th of July festival was tomorrow: balloons, fireworks, hot dogs, lemonade, same as every year. But for some in this town, July 4th wasn't about celebration. It was about a girl who never came home. And the only one who might still remember what happened, had 4 legs and a nose that never forgot. The case had been cold for 37 years. Every town has its secrets. Ash Valley's was Hannah Lee Morgan, the 23-year-old girl who disappeared on Independence Day in 1987. She was last seen wearing a red bandana, white blouse, and denim skirt. The 4th of July colors. They called her America's Daughter on the flyers. Her body turned up a week later in a field by the river, broken and half-buried. There were no suspects. No arrests. Just silence. Until now. "Smokey, you ready to dig through ghosts?" Jared muttered, patting the side of the K-9 unit's back seat. A low woof answered back. Smokey, a 7-year-old German shepherd with graying ears and a scar across his right flank, had been Jared's partner for 5 years. Bombs, bodies, missing kids, they'd seen it all. But this case was different. It was personal. Jared unlocked the archive room in the back of the station. The air was thick with old paper and regret. Inside were rusting file cabinets, labeled with faded masking tape, unsolved, 1980 to 1989, homicides. He found it on the bottom shelf. Morgan, H.L., July 4, 1987. The report was yellowed, the corners brittle. There were Polaroids paper-clipped to the file, grainy photos of Hannah Morgan, smiling behind the souvenir counter of Stars and Stripes, a local gift shop that sold keychains and mugs with eagles and American flags. Another photo showed her the night she vanished, on the plaza, fireworks lighting the sky behind her. She was talking to someone. A man. Only the edge of his blue shirt and blurry profile showed in the corner. Smokey let out a sudden low growl. His nose brushed against that exact photo. "You see something?" Jared leaned in. "Who is that?" He flipped the photo over. No notes. No name. Hannah's file had dozens of witness statements, but the narrative was messy. She'd spent the day selling souvenirs, closed up around 8 p.m., and joined her family in the town square for the fireworks. Her cousin, Tyler Jameson, and another cousin, Laura, confirmed she stayed behind after the show to soak up the atmosphere. A bartender remembered her having a Sprite around midnight. A waitress said she was laughing with tourists around 2 a.m. At 2:15 a.m., she walked out of Mel's Diner, alone. She never made it home. Back in the present, Jared stared at the old street map. Mel's Diner still stood. Just a block from the river. Just 2 blocks from her apartment on Sycamore Street. She was almost home, Jared said aloud. Smokey sat, ears forward, eyes locked on the door. "All right, boy," Jared whispered, grabbing his leash. "Let's retrace her steps." It was almost midnight when Jared and Smokey walked the route from Mel's Diner to the old apartment building. The neighborhood had changed, some new shops, a vape store, a yoga studio, but the bones of the street were the same. They passed the alley behind the diner. Smokey stopped. Then slowly lowered his snout to the concrete. He sniffed deep, then again, pacing a tight circle. "Whatcha got?" Smokey stepped toward a rusted dumpster and pawed at the ground. Jared knelt down. The asphalt was cracked, nothing unusual, but near the drain was something lodged deep in the crevice. A thin red thread. He pulled it out with tweezers. It was worn, faded, but unmistakable. The texture was identical to the red bandanas still sold every 4th at the local shop. "Jesus," Jared muttered. "After all these years." He sent the thread to the lab the next morning. The results came back 2 days later, textile consistent with other samples collected from Hannah's clothing in 1987. It wasn't enough to reopen the case on its own, but it wasn't nothing either. Jared brought the photos and the thread to Chief Mallory. "You want to chase a 37-year-old murder with a dog's nose and a piece of thread?" the chief asked, skeptical. "I think Smokey's onto something," Jared said. Chief Mallory sighed. "Start with the cousin, Tyler Jameson. He was the last one to see her, right?" "Yeah. But the file says he passed a polygraph." "Polygraph ain't gospel. Talk to him again. People remember things differently with time." 2 days later, Kentucky. Jared found Tyler Jameson outside of Lexington, running a hardware store. Tyler, now 58, was friendly but cautious. His hands trembled slightly as he poured coffee. Smokey sat near his feet, still and quiet, but watching. "You said in the report that you left Hannah around 12:30? "Yeah," Tyler said, eyes flicking downward. "She wanted to stay. I told her to come with us. She refused." "She say why?" "She said she was meeting someone." Jared leaned forward. "Did she say who?" Tyler hesitated. "She said someone from the shop. I assumed a coworker. Maybe one of the Gormans. Jason or Mr. Eddie." Eddie Gorman was the owner of Stars and Stripes. He had been the first to report Hannah missing. Back in the cruiser, Jared stared at the dash. Smokey shifted in his seat. His eyes locked onto something on the passenger side floor, an old work boot Tyler had tossed there. Smokey sniffed, then barked once. Jared leaned over and sniffed himself, dusty, but faintly chalky. He grabbed a swab and gently scraped the heel. When the results came back from the lab the next morning, his heart froze. Traces of construction-grade lime and red brick dust. The same substances found under Hannah's fingernails in the 1987 autopsy. Jared looked down at Smokey. "You just cracked open the past, boy. And the past wasn't going to stay buried much longer." Ash Valley, Indiana, July 6, 2024. The morning air was heavy with dew, and the only sound outside the Ash Valley Police Department was the rhythmic panting of Smokey in the back seat of the cruiser. Officer Jared Bennett stared at the test results in his hand. Construction-grade lime. Brick dust. Same composition found under Hannah Morgan's fingernails in 1987. The problem? The sample came from the heel of Tyler Jameson's old work boot, found sitting casually on the floor of his pickup truck. Jared had expected a dead end, maybe some farm soil, not the exact mineral makeup of a 37-year-old murder case. Jared wasn't a man prone to superstition, but this felt like something more than coincidence. And Smokey knew it. Later that afternoon, Jared called Tyler. "Mind if I ask where you wore those boots recently?" "Just around the backyard. Cleared out the shed last weekend." "You been near any old job sites? Construction?" There was a pause. "Well, I helped out on my uncle's farm last month. He's got an old foundation he's tearing up. Could have been that." But Jared wasn't convinced. Neither was Smokey. Back at the station, Jared pulled the original crime scene notes from 1987. The coroner had made a vague mention of particulate materials found on the victim's skin, lime, red clay, possibly industrial. But no one had followed up. No CSI unit had gone hunting for matching terrain. Maybe they didn't want to know. Maybe the town just couldn't handle it. Smokey let out a short, sharp bark from behind him. Jared turned. The German shepherd had his snout pressed against an old blueprint unrolled on the floor. It was a zoning map from 1986, showing city expansion projects. "Jesus, you're serious," Jared muttered. Smokey pawed once at a spot just west of the river. "Oak Hollow redevelopment, proposed July 1987. The site had been slated for an apartment complex. It was never built. A fire on the job site halted construction in late '87, and the land sat untouched for decades. Time to pay it a visit. The Oak Hollow site, July 6, 3:42 p.m. The lot was now overgrown with high grass, saplings, and discarded beer cans. A single, rusted-out backhoe sat like a tombstone near the fence. Jared parked outside the rusted gate and clicked open Smokey's door. "Let's work, boy." Smokey's demeanor shifted instantly, ears high, nose twitching, body tense. They moved through the waist-high weeds, Jared with a flashlight and Smokey leading the way. Midway through the lot, Smokey suddenly stopped. He crouched low and began to dig, paws sending tufts of dry earth into the air. "Whoa, easy, Smokey," Jared said, kneeling beside him. And then he saw it, a fragment of red cloth, buried inches beneath the surface. It looked like part of a scarf or bandana, stained and frayed with age. Jared pulled out his phone and snapped photos. He placed the fabric in an evidence bag and kept scanning the area. Nearby, Smokey sniffed along a concrete slab, once part of the building's foundation. He barked once and sat. Jared knelt down. The slab bore faint red smudges, something that could have been paint, or something else. The lab results, July 7. The cloth fragment was confirmed, a fiber matched to Hannah's clothing, previously documented in the autopsy files. The concrete slab? Traces of old blood. Human. Female. It was enough for Jared to ask for a full reinvestigation. And to re-interview some of the people who were there back in 1987. Interview Room A, July 8. "Mr. Gorman, thank you for coming in." Edward Eddie Gorman sat stiffly in the metal chair, gray hair combed back, pressed button-down tucked into his jeans. He looked every bit the town grandfather, the type to flip pancakes at Rotary Club breakfasts and donate American flags to veterans. "I'm always happy to help," he said smoothly. "You were Hannah's employer," Jared began. "I was. She worked at my store that summer. God bless her. Sweetest girl I ever hired. You were the one who reported her missing, correct?" "That's right. When she didn't open the shop the next morning, I knew something was wrong." Jared glanced at Smokey, lying calmly at his side. "She ever mention anything about someone bothering her?" Eddie's brow furrowed. "No." "Why?" Jared leaned forward. "Back then, did your son Jason ever come by the shop?" Eddie blinked. "Jason? Well, sure, sometimes. He helped unload inventory. He was about 22 then." Jared placed the old plaza photo on the table. "You recognize this guy talking to Hannah?" Eddie squinted. "Can't really tell, but could be Jason. Hard to say." Smokey sat up. His body language changed, back straight, ears tight, head tilted slightly. A cue Jared had seen before. Smokey sensed something. Jason Gorman, July 9, 2024. Jared drove to the upscale real estate office where Jason Gorman now worked. He was charismatic, tan, with a blinding smile and the kind of handshake that squeezed just a bit too long. "You're investigating the old Hannah Morgan case, right?" Jason said, leading Jared to his office. "That's right. Tragic story. My dad still talks about her. It tore him up." Jared dropped the photo on the desk. "This was taken the night she disappeared." Jason's smile faltered. "Okay. I think that's you." Jason chuckled nervously. "Could be. I was around. It was 4th of July. Everyone was downtown." Smokey, who had been quiet until now, walked behind Jason's desk. His head lowered. He sniffed the baseboard. Then growled. Jason turned sharply. "Hey, get your dog out of there. Jared didn't move. He's trained to pick up chemical traces, blood, even decay. That spot behind your cabinet, you ever have reason to clean it with bleach? Jason went pale. That's ridiculous. Jared stood. Mind giving a DNA sample? Jason crossed his arms. Not without a warrant. Back at the station, Jared stared at the whiteboard filled with old photos, new evidence, and one nagging truth. Smokey didn't bark unless something was there. And Jared had learned long ago, when Smokey pointed, you follow. He turned back to the case file. There, in the corner, was a handwritten note from 1987, never followed up. Employee says Jason Gorman stopped by the shop July 3, spoke to Hannah in backroom. Door was closed for 10 minutes. Jared circled the note in red marker. Then called the lab. Test everything we got, the scarf, the slab, the boots, and check for Gorman's DNA. The past was talking. And this time, Jared and Smokey were listening. The sun beat down on Ash Valley's dog park like a slow, hot truth, steady and impossible to ignore. Officer Jared Bennett stood near the edge of the old fence, watching Smokey pace a slow circle around a tree stump near the northeast corner. The town had built the park just over a decade ago, on land that used to be a condemned construction zone. No one really remembered what had stood here before. Just another forgotten site on the edge of town. But Smokey remembered something. It started with the test results. The forensic lab confirmed Jared's suspicions. The dried debris on Tyler Jameson's old work boots contained construction-grade lime, fractured red brick particles, and trace amounts of rust, all consistent with materials listed in the original autopsy from 1987. Back then, investigators believed Hannah Morgan had been murdered elsewhere and moved to the riverbank where she was found. Now Jared was beginning to think they'd had the crime scene all wrong. If Smokey could find the original location, the place Hannah was killed, then maybe, just maybe, they could pull the rest of the story out of the dirt. It was quiet at the park, except for the flutter of a flag and the soft jingle of a leash somewhere in the distance. Smokey froze near the base of a tall maple. He lowered his snout, sniffed twice, and let out a single sharp bark. Jared followed quickly, watching his partner circle a patch of earth beside the roots. The dog's posture changed, tail stiff, body tense. "Whatcha got, buddy?" Smokey dug. Not wildly, but precise. Controlled. About 6 inches down, his claws caught on something. Jared knelt and brushed away the loose soil. A faded scrap of red fabric, frayed at the edges and spotted with time-stained brown, emerged from the dirt. His breath caught. It was the same pattern as the bandanas worn by vendors and staff during the 1987 parade, the one sold at Stars and Stripes, where Hannah had worked. Jared had seen dozens of photos of her in that signature red square around her neck. He pulled out a small evidence bag, gently placed the fabric inside, and zipped it closed. Smokey sat beside him, watching. Good boy. Back at the precinct, Jared called in a favor to a lab tech he trusted in Indianapolis. Test this for DNA, he said. Human skin cells, blood, sweat, anything you can pull. You think this thing still got viable samples after 37 years? I think it's worth a shot. And if it matches the old case? Then it was dropped during the murder. Not after. The line went silent for a beat. Damn, the tech whispered. You really might be onto something. The next morning, Jared walked into the old souvenir shop on Main, now renamed American Pride. But the bones of the place were still the same. He was here to talk to Jason Gorman, the new manager, and son of the store's original owner, Edward Gorman. Jason was in his mid-50s now. Clean-shaven, dressed in khakis and a tucked-in polo. Church-going type. Worked the register himself most days. Married. Kids. Respected. Officer Bennett, he greeted with a tight smile. I heard you were poking around the old Hannah Morgan case. Some new evidence came up. Jason's expression didn't change, but his shoulders stiffened ever so slightly. Really? After all these years? Sometimes dogs remember what people forget. Jared looked down at Smokey, who was sniffing along the display racks quietly. Well, I'm not sure how I can help. I was just a kid back then. You were 22, right? Same age as Hannah. Jason nodded slowly. I guess that's true. You remember seeing her that night? Jason paused. I mean, yeah, we all did. It was the 4th of July. She was working late, then headed to the square. Some people say she was supposed to meet someone from the shop. Jason blinked. I wouldn't know about that. Smokey gave a low, barely audible growl. His nose had locked onto a box of old inventory in the corner, dusty and half unpacked. Jared followed. What's in there? Jason looked hesitant. Just old stuff. My dad used to keep random memorabilia. Probably junk. Jared knelt down and opened the box. Inside were faded vendor shirts, flyers from past parades, and a blue t-shirt, the exact same shade as the one seen in the blurred photo from 1987, with Hannah talking to a man outside Mel's diner. Jared looked up sharply. This yours? Jason swallowed hard. No. That was my dad's. He had dozens. But Jared had seen Jason in parade photos from '87, wearing the same color shirt. He bagged it. Smokey didn't growl this time, but his body stiffened. Alert mode. They were close now. Jared could feel it. The call came in just before sunset. The red fabric Smokey had uncovered tested positive for Hannah Morgan's blood and epithelial cells, likely from sweat or skin contact. But more importantly, the lab pulled partial DNA from a second person. Male. Not Hannah's cousin Tyler. Not her brother. Not any previously submitted samples from the original investigation. We ran it against our cold case database, the lab tech said. No direct hits, but enough for genealogical profiling. Meaning? Give us a few days, and we can tell you whose family it came from. That night, Jared sat in his cruiser outside the old construction site, lights off, Smokey resting quietly in the back seat. You found where she died, Jared whispered. 37 years, and you still knew. Smokey let out a quiet huff. He was tired, but proud. Jared stared at the crime scene photos again, especially the one with Hannah and the mystery man in the diner lot. He zoomed in on the shoulder. The shirt. The posture. It wasn't Tyler. It wasn't a stranger. He thought about Jason Gorman's nervous eyes. The way his hands had trembled slightly when Jared mentioned the name Hannah. A theory started forming in Jared's mind. What if Jason wasn't just someone who worked with Hannah? What if he had loved her? What if she didn't love him back? What if that rejection turned fatal? As the stars emerged one by one over Ash Valley, Officer Jared Bennett leaned back in the driver's seat and stared up at the sky. He felt the pressure of time, all those wasted years, all the pain Hannah's parents carried to their graves. Smokey sat up now, resting his head on Jared's shoulder. We're not letting this one go, Jared said softly. He knew the truth was coming. And this time, it wasn't going to slip away in the dark. Ash Valley, Indiana, July 14, 2024. Some killers hide in the shadows. Others stand right under the streetlights, smiling, shaking hands, attending candlelight vigils with the rest of the town. Officer Jared Bennett stared at the faded photo tacked on his evidence board. In it, Hannah Morgan stood behind the counter at Stars and Stripes, laughing at something out of frame. To her left, slightly blurred, was a middle-aged man in a white apron with an eagle pin on his chest. Edward "Eddie" Gorman. Her boss. The man who claimed he'd called the police when she didn't show up for work the morning after the fireworks. The man who passed out flyers and organized her memorial. The man nobody ever questioned. Until now. Jared ran the DNA report again. The fiber found beneath Hannah's fingernails back in 1987 had been partially preserved. With modern testing, the lab had pulled a degraded male DNA sample, not enough for a match, but enough to generate a partial family profile. 3 surnames came up in the genealogical crossmatch. Urrutia. Elizondo. Gorman. 2 of those names were common in northern Indiana. One stood out. The Gormans had lived in Ash Valley for over 60 years. Eddie Gorman, now 84, still lived in a small craftsman house near Main Street. But it was his son, Jason, who caught Jared's attention. Jason Gorman. Born 1965. That would have made him 22 in 1987. Exactly the age witnesses estimated for the man in the blue shirt seen talking to Hannah on the plaza around 2 a.m. the night she disappeared. Jared leaned back in his chair. Why wasn't he interviewed? The original file never mentioned Jason, only his father. Jason had worked summers at the shop but wasn't officially on payroll. Back then, that meant no record. No accountability. And maybe, no suspicion. Later that afternoon, Jared and Smokey parked outside a red brick law office in downtown Ash Valley. The sign on the front window read, Gorman and Grady, Civil Litigation and Estates. Jason Gorman, now 59, had a J.D. from Indiana University and a well-kept reputation. Churchgoer. Board member at the town's historical society. Married with 2 grown kids. He was the poster child for upstanding citizen. Jared rang the bell. Jason opened the door himself, smiling warmly. Officer Bennett, right? I heard you were digging into some old cases. What can I do for you? Smokey stepped forward, his nose twitching. He let out a low whine, not a growl, but close. Jared nodded politely. Mind if we ask you a few questions? Inside, the office was decorated with framed law certificates, sports memorabilia from IU, and family photos. Jared noticed a faded picture on the bookshelf, Jason as a teenager, arms slung casually around another boy in front of the Stars and Stripes storefront. This about Hannah? Jason asked, pouring coffee. I was just a kid when that happened. You were 22, Jared corrected, taking a seat. That's not a kid. Jason hesitated for a moment. Right. I guess time makes everything seem younger. You remember where you were that night? Sure. I was with some college friends. I came back to town for the weekend. We were at the fireworks, then went drinking near the lake. Got home late. Anyone vouch for that? Jason blinked. Not that I can remember. It was 37 years ago. Smokey sniffed along the floor molding, then stood still at the threshold of the laundry room. He barked once, sharply. Sorry about that, Jason said quickly. Probably the dryer sheets. Some dogs hate the scent. But Smokey wasn't reacting to fabric softener. His body was stiff. Eyes locked on the laundry basket tucked beside the dryer. Jared walked over slowly. Inside the basket was a pair of running shoes, and a dust-covered storage box, half cracked open. Mind if I take a look? Jared asked. Jason froze. It's just old family stuff. Jared popped the lid open. Inside were old work shirts. Branded polos from Stars and Stripes. One of them was sky blue, faded with time, a small tear near the collar. And a spot on the right cuff that looked suspiciously dark. Jared bagged it carefully. Forensics came back the next morning. The stain was too old to identify completely, no DNA, but it tested positive for trace amounts of human blood and aged brick dust, chemically consistent with materials found in Hannah's autopsy. The lab also found fibers matching the red scarf Smokey had uncovered near Mel's diner. All of it circumstantial. But stacked together, it painted a dangerous picture. Jared called in for a voluntary DNA sample. Jason agreed, but his tone had shifted. "Is this really necessary?" he asked. "I was a kid. So was Hannah. A lot of us had crushes back then. It was a small town." "You said you didn't know her well," Jared reminded him. Jason said nothing. 3 days later, the results came in. Partial match. 94%. Not enough for a warrant. But enough to confront. Jason didn't answer his front door when Jared returned. Smokey paced the porch, ears twitching. Through the window, the lights were off, but a vehicle was missing from the driveway. Jared radioed dispatch. "Be on the lookout for a silver GMC Sierra, license plate ending in 4T9. Subject is Jason Gorman. Possibly evading questioning." Within 2 hours, a state trooper spotted the vehicle parked at a remote campground 15 miles east of town. Jason was seated on a rock near the edge of a bluff, staring into the distance. When Jared approached, he didn't move. "I didn't mean to hurt her," Jason whispered. Smokey sat beside Jared, alert but calm. "She was just so beautiful. So confident. I told her how I felt. She laughed. Said I was just Eddie's boy. She turned to walk away and..." His voice broke. "She hit the ground so fast. I panicked." "You called your dad," Jared said flatly. Jason nodded. "He told me not to say a word. We moved her before dawn." Jared stared at him for a long moment. "You know how many people you hurt?" Jason wept. "Every damn day since." That night, Smokey curled up in the corner of the station. Jared stood over the evidence board, staring at the final puzzle piece in place. Justice had taken 37 years. But thanks to a scarred old shepherd with a nose for truth, Ash Valley could finally breathe again. Ash Valley, Indiana, March 12, 2025. The cold had returned overnight, a thin layer of frost icing the fields along the old river trail where Hannah Morgan's body had been discovered 37 years ago. Officer Jared Bennett stood silently near the memorial cross, a new one, whitewashed with red lettering that read, "Always Remembered. 1964 to 1987. Smokey sat beside him, ears upright, nose twitching toward the tree line. "Almost there, partner," Jared whispered. They weren't just chasing ghosts anymore. They were about to confront one. The DNA results had come back. Jason Gorman, the man seen in the old photo beside Hannah Morgan the night she vanished, the son of her employer Eddie Gorman, matched 94% of the degraded DNA found under her fingernails. Not enough to convict. But enough to confront. And Jared didn't need a warrant for a conversation. He needed answers. Jason still lived in Ash Valley. He'd never moved away, never drawn suspicion. Married once, divorced quietly. Ran the local hardware store now. Quiet, polite, and always visible, the perfect camouflage. When Jared walked into the store that morning, Smokey at his side, Jason was stacking boxes of lawn fertilizer near aisle 6. "Mr. Gorman?" Jared called out. Jason turned. His face went still when he saw the badge, and Smokey's piercing stare. "Officer Bennett. Can I help you with something?" Smokey growled. Low. Controlled. His body stayed in place, but his stare never broke. It wasn't aggression. It was recognition. Jared had seen it before, when Smokey locked on to someone whose scent was buried in the darkest corners of evidence. "We'd like to ask you a few questions," Jared said. "About the night Hannah Morgan went missing." Jason's face didn't flinch, but his hands did. He dropped the box. Lawn fertilizer spilled across the tile. They sat in the back office of the store. Jason poured himself a glass of water with trembling hands. You were 22 in 1987, correct? Jared began. Yes. You worked for your father's store? Full time. Did you know Hannah? Jason nodded slowly. She worked part-time. Summers mostly. Sweet girl. Funny. The customers loved her. Where were you the night she disappeared? He looked down at his glass. At the plaza. I left early. Went home. Anyone see you? My dad, maybe. Anyone outside your family? Jason looked up. No. Jared leaned forward. You were seen in a photograph that night. Standing just behind her. Blue shirt. 4th of July. That was you, wasn't it? Jason paused. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Smokey stood up. Walked to Jason. Sniffed once. Then sat down. Quiet. Unmoving. That was all Jared needed. Jason broke. It didn't take yelling. No threats. Just silence. And Smokey. I didn't mean to hurt her, Jason whispered. He looked older now. Smaller. Like time had finally caught up. She stayed late. After her cousins left. We started talking. I thought, maybe she liked me. I misread it. Jared didn't speak. Just let the truth unspool. She laughed when I told her. Said I was sweet, but no. I don't know what came over me. I grabbed her wrist, and she slapped me. Tears filled his eyes. I shoved her. She fell. Hit her head on the concrete. There was blood, but she was still breathing. She screamed at me. Said she was going to the police. I panicked. Jared felt his jaw tighten. Jason looked at Smokey. I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted her to stop yelling. I grabbed a rock. One of those from the edge of the plaza. I don't know how many times. He buried his face in his hands. I called my dad. Told him everything. He helped me move the body to the empty lot. Said nobody would look there. He burned the shirt. Buried the scarf in the trash behind Mel's diner. We thought it would go away. Jared sat back, heart pounding. He thought of Hannah's parents, long gone now. Of Diego, falsely accused. Of Smokey, pawing at an old thread from 1987. Why now? Jason asked softly. After all this time? Jared looked down at his partner. Because he never forgot. 2 days later. Ash Valley Courthouse. Jason Gorman was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. The confession, corroborated by new DNA technology and physical evidence Smokey helped uncover, sealed the case. The town watched in stunned silence as Jason, the boy next door, was led away in cuffs. But one person watched with something different in his eyes. Diego Jameson. He stood behind the courthouse doors. Older, gray in his beard, but clear-eyed. Jared nodded toward him. I heard, Diego said. Thank you. I'm sorry it took this long. Diego looked down at Smokey. Tell him thank you too. April 4, 2025, Ash Valley Memorial Garden. A statue now stood in the town square. Simple. Elegant. A bronze cast of a young woman with a scarf in her hand, standing tall against the wind. Beside it sat another figure, a German shepherd in alert posture. It wasn't labeled Hannah. It didn't need to be. Jared placed a single red rose at the base. Smokey sat beside him, quiet, watchful. You did good, buddy. He looked out at the crowd, children, parents, neighbors. Ash Valley's quiet again, Jared whispered. But this time, for the right reason. Folded hands. Thank you for following Hannah Morgan's story. A young woman silenced for decades finally got her voice back, thanks to a dog who never gave up. Paw prints. What do you believe makes a K9's loyalty so powerful? Have you ever witnessed a dog do something extraordinary? Share your story in the comments below, we'd love to hear it.